dragon's blood. One of our calculations must have been off. Let me guess, math is 0.327% harder in your universe.
Well, maybe we should contact my counterpart and see if she has any ideas. I mean, what did happen to her, by the way? Can we talk?
Hey Star Trek fans, welcome back to Kertrats Productions and the start of a new season of Star Trek Lower Decks. The 5th season of Lower Decks premiered on Thursday, October 24th, with 2 new episodes, Dos Cerritos and Shades of Green. This video features my review of Dos Cerritos, along with the Easter eggs and canon connections I found in the episode. And let me tell you, there were many, even for a Lower Decks episode. And also, before we get started, a quick apology for the lateness of this video. Things have been a little crazy around my household lately, but I'm hoping to get caught up with 3 reviews in a short period of time here. So let's get started with Dos Cerritos. And of course, beware of spoilers. As the title of the episode implies, Dos Cerritos features multiversal shenanigans as the crew of the Cerritos meets themselves from another quantum reality. However, unlike most other instances of universe crossing we've seen, this one is just 0.327% different, rather than the complete inversion of, say, the mirror universe. I feel like this was an interesting choice for the episode, as it allows our characters to see how their lives could be different with just a few changes in luck or choices along the way. Most notable in this respect is, of course, Mariner. Her counterpart, Becky Freeman, is the captain of the alternate Cerritos, and as we find out in the course of the episode, she rules the ship with an iron fist. This allows Mariner to see what she could become if she had just made different choices along the way. However, having said that, it seems to me that this quantum reality is different from the Prime universe in a few different ways. While, again, it isn't the complete moral inversion of the mirror universe, it seems like everyone here is just a little bit more dickish, for lack of a better term. The uniforms are just a shade darker, which I think is a metaphor for the slightly darker edge that this crew of the alternate Cerritos exhibits. This could, of course, all be due to the influence of the dictatorial Captain Becky Freeman, but I think there's something deeper at play here. The other characters get some time to explore their counterparts' different choices as well. Rutherford sees what he could become if Tendi leaves the Cerritos for good. Already in this episode, we've seen him take a dark turn, burying himself in his work in order to not think about the sad stuff, in his words. Rutherford has similarly buried himself in his work, but has gone even further, augmenting himself with more and more implants which serve to make him closer to a Borg than his old self.
He's more machine now than man, twisted and evil.
Evil, of course, is overstating things by quite a bit, but this is definitely a darker take on Rutherford. He has erased all of his memories of Tendi in order to escape the hurt caused by her departure. Our Rutherford takes it upon himself to reprogram Otherford, raising some ethical questions that the episode is not really interested in examining, and Otherford becomes more open to friendship with our Rutherford. At the end of the episode, rather than deleting the memories when Rutherford leaves, Otherford decides to keep them, showing that this experience has had a lasting effect on him. And then there's Boimler, whose bearded alternate self seems to possess all of the qualities that our Boimler feels he lacks: confidence, self-assuredness, and of course, the cover page of Fleet magazine. The envy Boimler feels is apparent, and his snatching of Beardy Boimler's pad foreshadows what can only be his future attempts to emulate his new hero, ironically himself. There are signs that this alternate Boimler really is the paragon of Starfleet officers. At the end of the episode, when Becky Freeman has forcibly switched places with Mariner, he is the one to stand up and say nobody deserves to be swapped out against their will, ordering the crew to stop Becky and the other Cerritos from escaping. If this universe is indeed 0.327% darker than the Prime universe, it doesn't seem to apply to Boimler, who exhibits all of the moral fortitude that the best of Starfleet has to offer. The secondary plotline in this episode centers around Tendi, who is pirating for her sister to pay her back for the Orion Dreadnought the Cerritos crew used at the end of last season to defeat Nick Locarno and his fleet. This story mainly serves to set up the next episode, featuring a war between the Tendi clan and the Blue Orions, who call themselves Orions. This is a brilliant callback to the animated series episode The Pirates of Orion. Or Orion, I guess.
Orions are not thieves. If you don't cease this harassment, we will lodge a formal protest with your government.
Orion is repeatedly and inexplicably pronounced Orion in that episode, and Dos Cerritos finally gives us a canon explanation. That's just how this particular clan pronounces it. I also loved the design of the Blues, giving them the overly cartoonish helmets and uniforms of their animated series counterparts. I also really enjoyed Tendi's 3-woman Orion pirate crew, and the revelation that what they really want is out of the pirate life, instead pursuing other dreams. My favorite is Kita, whose dream is to become a professional dancer. I love the look on her face when she dances, especially when a particularly flamboyant dance move causes the medical systems on the crashed Orion ship to activate. All in all, this was a very strong start to Season 5 with the trademark Lower Decks wit that we've come to love, but with some deeper and more profound themes as well. Lower Decks often strikes a tone between hilarity and deeper meaning, and after 4 seasons they seem to have nailed that balance. In between all of the jokes are important life lessons about being true to oneself and to allow yourself to feel your feelings. Another lesson is to believe in yourself, one that I believe Boimler will be learning over the course of the season. The jokes, as usual, are top-notch, with some superb line deliveries by Tawny Newsome as Mariner, as per usual. Also great in this episode is T'Lyn, which is a sentence I think I'm going to be saying a lot this season. She is very quickly becoming one of my favorite Star Trek characters of all time. Her joke at the end of the episode was delivered perfectly by Gabrielle Ruiz. Now let's move on to the Easter eggs and canon connections that I found in this episode. So first of all, the collector ship we see at the very beginning is based on a studio model that was frequently used in 90s Trek, Deep Space Nine, TNG, and even Voyager. We see Tendi masquerading as a Hellion. The Hellions were only featured in one live-action episode. Lieutenant Aquiel Unari from the TNG episode Aquiel is a Hellion. The collector character in this episode is very obviously based on Paylor Toph from the TNG episode The Most Toys. Interestingly enough, the character is not in fact Toph himself, but according to the subtitles is named Yorif. However, like Toph, he has a Veltan lust idol, which is referred to as a Veltan sex idol in the TNG episode. He also employs Hupyrian guards. The most prominent Hupyrian we've seen over the years is Mayhardu, the manservant of Grand Dankus Zek on Deep Space Nine. Yorif's display room is very clearly based on Kivas Fajo's room from the episode The Most Toys. On display along with the Veltan lust idol is a Horgon, the traditional statue used on Risa to indicate that you are seeking Jamaharan. Also, oddly enough, on display in this room, along with all of the lust idols, is the Bajoran tablet from The Reckoning, smashed by Sisko. Strangely, this relic also shows up in Season 2 of Star Trek Picard, so at some point, Yorif loses possession to Jean-Luc Picard, or one or both of these are clever forgeries. The alert sound aboard the ship is the same as Voyager's red alert sound, and the Orion ship that Tendi is commanding is very similar to the Orion ships seen in Star Trek Enterprise. And finally, when Yorif realizes that Tendi and her crew are getting the drop on him, he pulls a phaser that is identical to the phasers seen in Star Trek The Motion Picture and Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan. They can also be seen in the TNG episode Yesterday's Enterprise. And those were just the Easter eggs and canon connections from before the opening credits. So, like I said, there are a lot in this episode. So in the opening credits, one of my favorite additions is the warp lines behind the title, much like Season 5 of TNG. I love that they put this in. It's one of those things where, I'm thinking they thought we wouldn't notice, but we noticed. And of course, every season they have to add to the big battle scene. And in this one, we get the addition of the Hand of Apollo. We have a number of Tholian ships spinning a web around the whole battle. And at the very end, V'ger makes an appearance, complete with the signature blaster bar musical instrument note along with it. When we come back from the credits, we have Mariner and T'Lyn playing Calto, a Vulcan game that was introduced in Star Trek Voyager. Boimler is upset that he is not featured in Fleet, the magazine of Starfleet, the cover very reminiscent of the Star Trek magazine. Naomi Wildman, however, does get a mention in Fleet. Boimler says she's only 10 years old, which actually lines up with how old she should be around this time. The Cerritos is investigating a quantum fissure. These were first seen in the TNG episode Parallels, so at this point we're pretty clear we're going to get some quantum reality shenanigans. We get a glimpse of Tendi's ready room aboard her pirate ship. Her ready room features a model of the Cerritos, maybe the one she and Rutherford built together, and a picture of the dog. The crashed Orion ship that she's assigned to salvage is very similar to the one from the Strange New Worlds episode Those Old Scientists, which itself was based on the ship from Journey to Babel. We get a reference to the Prime universe, much to the annoyance of the alternate Ransom, who of course sees his universe as being Prime. We learn the origin of Mariner's name in the episode. It is apparently her middle name. And as I mentioned earlier, my favorite reference here is the green Orions and blue Orions from the Pirates of Orion in TAS. We get a small reference to the first episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, Boimler being gummed by the spider and screaming, "My bones!" I like Mariner shouting out the Kzinti species name in her expletive as she bursts onto the shuttle bay to see the two crews fighting.
What the Kzinti is going on in here? There's no interpersonal conflict allowed on my ship.
And a reference to Roddenberry's rule of no interpersonal conflict, strictly enforced by Becky Freeman. I think she missed the point of that. Becky Freeman's riding crop, of course, reminded me of Captain Styles of the Excelsior and his swagger stick in Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. We also see Becky Freeman's ready room in this episode, and along with a lot of the familiar stuff that is in there from her mother, we also see a bat'leth, a dagger, and a model of what I assume is the USS Quito, an Olympic-class ship that was shown in a previous episode to be a prior posting of Beckett Mariner. One of my favorite bits in this episode is the sarcastic Vulcan salute scene, the callback to the Season 1 episode Moist Vessel. Boimler does a reverse Riker maneuver, getting out of the chair to take command of the Cerritos. I also love the recurring Starbase 80 joke, and Freeman being more upset about the idea that she might have been assigned to that station rather than having died. And finally, on the bar, we see a bottle of Kanar with the label of Quark's Bar, much like we saw in an episode of Deep Space Nine. Well, those were my thoughts and all of the Easter eggs and canon connections that I was able to find in Season 5, Episode 1, Dos Cerritos. Were there any that I missed? Please let me know in the comments below. What did you think of this episode? Please let me know that as well. Thank you all so much for watching, and thanks especially to the Patreon supporters for your help in bringing these videos to you each and every week. Thank you so very much. To everyone else, thank you again for watching. Share this video with anyone you think might enjoy it, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, as always, live long and prosper.